Hi, I'm Jacob Heilbrunn, the editor of the National Interest. I'm here today with Dennis Ross, a distinguished diplomat and policymaker, to discuss the Middle East and his latest book, Doomed to Succeed. Dennis, what's the thesis of your new book?
Well, the essence is reflecting the title in some respects, which obviously has a sense of irony. There has been an evolution in this relationship. It has been marked by ups and downs. The character of the ups and downs, in a sense, reflects what has oftentimes been an American approach to the Middle East that is driven by how it perceives what they think Arab priorities are as opposed to what Arab priorities may actually be. And that we have evolved in our relationship with the Israelis because fundamentally we share values, we share interests, and frequently we share threats. And the thrust of the book suggests the evolution has moved in a certain way, a positive way, notwithstanding the ups and downs, because ultimately what we share is much stronger than what divides us.
Dennis, you've served in a number of presidential administrations, both Democratic and Republican. How unusual do you think that the strains were that manifested themselves between President Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, they certainly were real, but they were not unprecedented. If you go back in time, you find that President Reagan and Prime Minister Begin did not have the closest of relationships. Reagan at one point said, gosh, he makes it hard to be a friend. President Bush, George H.W. Bush, really disliked only one foreign leader, and there was only one foreign leader with whom he wasn't civil. I mean, his normal personality was to be gracious with everybody, and the only one with whom he really acted in a kind of uncharacteristic way was Yitzhak Shamir. So we've seen periods where we've had presidents and prime ministers have differences, personal differences, and have strategic differences. So that was not uncommon, I think, and certainly not unprecedented. I do think what has made this seem maybe stronger than before is just the nature of the difference on Iran and the way it was played out in such a public fashion, including specifically having the Prime Minister of Israel come and address the American Congress in a way that was obviously done with support of one side of the Congress, meaning the Republican Party, and in opposition to both the administration and many of the Democrats on the Hill.
Speaking of Iran, what is your assessment of the Obama administration's Iran deal, and do you believe that it could eventually lead to some form of détente between Washington and Tehran?
I think the deal, if it's implemented, buys 15 years. The problems I had with it were not related to whether or not it buys 15 years. It does buy 15 years if it's implemented. It has clearly good elements from that standpoint. For me, a lot depends upon how we take advantage of those 15 years. What worries me, and has always worried me about the deal, is that after year 15, there are no limitations on how large a nuclear program the Iranians can build. And I worry that that may mislead them into thinking that with the gap between threshold status and weapons status being very small, they might at some point feel they can simply present the world with a fait accompli. So I want us to take advantage of these 15 years to build up a firewall. And if we do, in a way that really cements deterrence of the Iranians, then the deal, I think, will prove itself to have actually been something that serves our interests. Will we have a détente with them? That really depends much more on the Iranians than it does on us. And what we've seen since the conclusion of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is that the Supreme Leader, if you're looking for signs of change in Iran, the kind of signs that you might have seen is something that indicates a change on the Supreme Leader's part. You're not seeing that. Something that suggests that maybe there'll be a change in terms of some of the institutions. Will the election for the Iranian parliament, will that bring in a lot of more pragmatic or reform types? And almost all of those candidates have been disqualified. So I don't think we should assume there's going to be any early change there. And Iran's behavior in the region, which is governed not by President Rouhani, but really governed primarily by the Revolutionary Guard, that remains also, I think, quite aggressive at this point. Does it mean there can never be a change? No. I think the fact that we have diplomatic channels suggests at least that there's a kind of communication that we have that's different than before. And if Iran gets integrated into the international financial system in a way that builds their stake in moderating behaviors, that could create some prospects over time. I'm not an optimist in the near term. And a lot depends upon what happens, I think, once the Supreme Leader goes. He's not a young man. He's reported not to be in great health. So what happens after Khamenei? Maybe you'll see the combination of being integrated into the international financial system and succession in Iran. Maybe that will create a potential for changes within Iran, but absent those changes within Iran, it's pretty hard to see detente emerging.
One of the fascinating wrinkles that emerged during the debate on Iran, and as a result of Netanyahu's vociferous opposition to the deal, including speaking before Congress and essentially snubbing Obama, was that talk increased that there are divisions in the American Jewish community, particularly among younger American Jews who view Israel's conduct in the West Bank and towards the Palestinians and Netanyahu with increasing disfavor. Do you think that that is a real problem in the future for Israel, or is it being exaggerated?
I suspect it's being exaggerated somewhat. I do think, even in the book, what I talk about in the concluding chapter, even though the book is entitled Doomed to Succeed, which implies the relationship will continue to evolve a certain way, I think there are some alarm bells that for those who are strong supporters of the relationship, they need to address. One is Israel really can't become a partisan issue. What has made the relationship a strong relationship is that Israel isn't seen as a Republican or Democratic issue, but an American issue. To the extent to which it becomes more partisan, that's problematic in no small part because the U.S. will become a minority-majority country in about 25 years, meaning the Asian American community, the African American community, the Hispanic American community will become the majority. Those are communities that don't have a history of a connection towards Israel. So Israel being nonpartisan remains important given that. Israel embodying its own democratic values and in a sense not being seen as changing in that regard is important from that standpoint. It also gets to the heart of what you're asking. The progressive side of the Democratic Party identifies less with Israel than in a sense everybody else. Younger Americans, again, who are on the more progressive side, also, I think, look more at Israel's behavior and are affected by that. Now, the reason I still remain generally optimistic is compare Israel to the rest of the region. This is a region that's going to be characterized by profound turmoil, violence of the worst sort, for at least the next 10 to 20 years, because the struggle in the Middle East is over identity and who's going to define it. And in Israel, there are problems, there are differences, there are struggles with the Palestinians, there's question marks with regard to their relationship with their own Israeli Arabs. But Israel still is a country that is ruled by law, with a separation of powers, an independent judiciary, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, women's rights are respected, gay rights are respected. So it has institutions to cope with its problems in a way that no other country in the region has. And I think that will allow it to continue to stand in pretty sharp contrast with the rest of the region, which is why I still am basically optimistic about the direction of U.S.-Israeli relations.
Dennis, I'd like to thank you for the interview, and I'm glad we're ending on an optimistic note.
Me too, thank you.